You're listening to the fucking Power Movement.
Welcome to the Powell Movement. I'm your host, Mike Powell, and this week my guest is Sammy Luebke, a three-time freeride world tour champion. Sammy's story is one of instant success. He had his first video clip at age 9, a whopping 21 years ago, and he's a guy who's had a very long, very different, and very successful career compared to a lot of the guys who I've had on the show. Looking back, Sammy was a sponsored rider at age 10 and filming with Standard Films and Travis Rice when he was going through puberty. And that was just the first part of his career. Throughout it all, he grew up fast, got hurt, lost his sponsors, got his future wife pregnant at 21, and then reinvented his career on the Freeride World Tour. Now at 30, Sammy has a unique perspective on the sport from the eyes of a derelict kid who turned into a proud dad. I recorded this podcast late Sunday night after I'd been smoking a bunch of stuff on my Traeger and drinking a few 10 barrels. I don't know why I'm telling you. Before we get into the podcast, I want to ask you to do a few things for me. The first is follow me on Instagram at The Powell Movement. Second, if you have any questions or concerns, feel free to email me. Mike@thepowellmovement.com is that address, and I will get back to you. Third, I'd like you to tell a friend about the show. That definitely helps it grow. And finally, I want to ask you to support my amazing sponsors who make the podcast happen. They are Evo, Stanley, Spy Optic, the Summit at Snoqualmie, and the 10 Barrel Brewery. Now, let's talk to Sammy Luebke.
Yo, Mike, what's up, buddy?
Not too much, man. How you doing?
Doing good, man. Doing good. Yeah, I'm like out of the house, back at the side house, which is kind of my situation with the way things are at home right now.
Yeah, it seems like we've been trying to do this forever, and life has gotten pretty crazy, but your life has been crazy, I think, a bunch of different times. But right now, it's just at a shitty point.
Most definitely at a point in my life that's confusing, but figuring it out the best I can, so.
Yeah, that will happen. And what do you do? It seems like you're always working as well, and you have no time whatsoever. You have 2 kids, you're in a relationship that's very complicated, and what is your day job?
Right now, like, I've been washing windows like the last 5 years, and as soon as the fall kind of hits, we start jumping into Christmas tree lighting. So it's been pretty full on with that the last couple months up until the snow and rain kind of started to fall. So it's kind of put a little damper on the work, but got to work as much as I can right now. Try to, keep things rolling up into the winter time and, up until the real work starts.
Can you make good money doing Christmas trees and window stuff? Is it like high risk windows where you're 80 feet in the air and people are scared to do it so you can charge a lot of money?
There's definitely a lot of money in cleaning windows and the Christmas tree lighting for sure. There's a lot, especially around here in Tahoe. There's a lot of big houses, a lot of people with a lot of money who will spend what they want to make their houses look nice. So it's a good place to be in the summertime. It's a good side gig and gives me that time to like take my mind off of snowboarding and focus a little more on work and being home with the kids and just kind of enjoying the off season a bit.
Do you love Christmas?
Oh, absolutely. Who doesn't?
I hate it. I'm Jewish, man. So I can't say that I love it, but we put about 15 hours into our house today and we are fully Christmased out. But yeah, at your house, do you guys have a big tree and do a full-on Christmas thing?
Yeah, the house is decked out right now. The kids love it, so we try to keep it super Christmassy as much as possible. I know when I was growing up, my mom always tried to deck it out and just kind of like put that vibe out and get you excited for Christmas Day. So, I'm assuming you like Hanukkah as much as I like Christmas, then, we're both in the same boat.
There's more of an emotional attachment around Christmas, where Hanukkah's just 8 days of presents, but whatever. There's a real part of Hanukkah where it actually represents oil. Christmas is a fat dude who goes down the chimney, but everybody loves presents. That's amazing. What's amazing to me is your email address. I'm not going to say where it's at, but it's puberty in the full effect. How old are you, first of all?
I'm 30.
So you're 30 years old. Your email's puberty in the full effect. Where does that even come from?
I started that email address when I was like 16 and getting into AOL Instant Messenger. So I was setting up the old email address and getting things dialed and kind of just stuck for a long time. And people seem to like it. I feel like, I got to change it at some point, from a professional standpoint, but I don't know. People love it. So you got to keep rolling with it. I'm fine with it.
Okay. And in life, I think you were born in Phoenix, Arizona, but you're only there for like a year. And then you moved to Alaska. You grew up there. Why Alaska? Did you already have family there?
Yeah, so born in Phoenix. Both my parents from Phoenix originally. Yeah, my dad and mom moved up there to start fishing, and my dad got locked in working at Tesoro Oil Refinery and made that his job for the last 35 years. And so we had just all moved up there and made that home. Kind of a blessing in disguise, I guess.
What's family life like? Is it the American dream of the white picket fence, mom, dad, and a couple of kids, or what was it like in your household?
Yeah, I wouldn't say that. It was definitely interesting, When we moved to Alaska, we lived in Kenai, so we were actually far away from the mountains. Kenai is definitely not a white picket fence type of town.
Blue collar kind of place?
Kenai is definitely more of a, full fish, kind of white trashy, outside of civilization type of town, kind of based on fishing. And a lot of people up there were working in the oil refineries. It was good. It was a good upbringing, I guess. We had a lot of freedom as kids, and, it wasn't as many rules as there are these days. So it was a good place to be growing up.
How did you get into snowboarding?
My older brother, he's 8 years older than me. He was kind of like the guy I looked up to. He was super good hockey player, just kind of good at everything. And that's probably what I was going to do, following his footsteps, everything he was doing. And, one day he started snowboarding, and all of his friends were kind of like my idols. So it just kind of became something that I wanted to do, following in his footsteps. We'd go up to Girdwood like every weekend. It's kind of just where it all started for me.
Did you start skiing, or was it snowboarding right away?
I definitely skied the first year, 6 years old. As soon as I started snowboarding, it was kind of like game over from that point, and couldn't stop doing it.
And I would think in Alaska, and especially when you're 5 to 8 years old, you're pretty removed from any sort of scene. You're really young. And are you watching videos and reading magazines and knowing what's going on in the snowboard world? Or is it all about just the love of the actual activity at that point?
I definitely was kind of too young to be reading magazines. My brother showed me TV5. That was kind of like my first introduction to like watching a snowboard video. And living in Kenai, I didn't even realize like half of what was going on was in Alaska, all this big mountain riding and stuff that like really didn't relate to me at that time, but was like super cool to watch. There was no scene for me. It was all love, It was just like this side activity that was just so different from everything for me that I just fell in love with it. And I knew that's what I wanted to do as soon as I started doing it.
Things happen quick in snowboarding for you. So are there any other sports before snowboarding becomes it?
No, man, I was just a little shit, running around Kenai, biking around with my friends. And, I figured, hey, I'll probably end up playing hockey. That's kind of what everybody did there, and started snowboarding. And that kind of took away from every other option. I know my dad wanted me to play baseball or football or, whatever. That's what he did when he was growing up in high school and went to college and played football. And I think he kind of saw that was something that I loved so much. So he was just like, we're going to go snowboarding.
Yeah, and after a few years, I think you're part of those Boarderline camps when you're like 8 or 9 years old. And what were those camps like back then? Because it seemed like there were some underground dudes that we knew a little bit about in the States that could have been there that might have been big influences to you.
Absolutely. So I moved to Girdwood, and first year at Boarderline camp, I was 7. Scott Liska ran Boarderline. That was kind of like the crew in AK. Pretty much everybody at Boarderline, those were the guys. And being in Alaska, it's very small. There wasn't a lot of outside influence other than the Alaska guys. And so like going to Boarderline camp was huge for me. That was my first year just being around this community of snowboarders and skaters and people who like truly just engulf their lives in snowboarding. And it gave everybody in Alaska this chance to come together at the end of the year and hang out, snowboard and skate for 2 weeks. And they didn't have a park or a pipe at Alyeska or anything like that. So it was like they'd come up, put up rails, build a pipe, build jumps, rebuild the skate park in Girdwood, and everyone just came together. And that kind of like truly got me into where I am now, just having that solid core group of people.
Through that camp, you meet Jason Borgstead and Cody Liska and a bunch of people, and you end up with clips in a JB Deuce video at like 9 years old. Are you shitting your pants at that point?
Yeah, absolutely. Jesse Burtner and Jason Borgstead, JB Deuce, you'd go to that premiere every year. That was the movie I looked forward to every year. And those were like the main guys at camp. Scott had a handful of some of the best riders and still some of my favorites to this day, like coaching camp and running camp. Just being able to see all those guys every year put out these parts in this movie that we all look forward to. And then getting just a couple shots in those movies was such a good feeling and something that I knew I wanted to do. And just seeing what all these guys were doing, I just loved the lifestyle and the fun we all had. It was just so fun. And it was kind of new, you know, like snowboarding wasn't that cool outside of people who snowboarded. So it was something that I attached myself to, that I love, that I ended up being good at. I don't know. It's crazy to talk about, but yeah, those guys are like the main reason why I push myself to do what I do now. So big ups to those guys, 100%.
And you're like 9 years old at this point, which is crazy young to have clips in a video, especially you. I think that's kind of a punk kid that is way too old for his own good. Do you see a lot of things in that world that most 10-year-olds don't?
I definitely grew up in that kind of in-between time. Snowboarding was definitely pretty rogue and thrasher before I started doing it. And I came at it at a pretty opportune time to still like enjoy snowboarding for what it was before it kind of went super mainstream. And it was interesting. I definitely saw a lot of things that young kids probably shouldn't see, and probably did a lot of things that young kids shouldn't do. And
how old were you the first time you smoked weed?
Oh man, I was probably 12 or 13 years old.
How about your first beer?
Probably around the same time. I guess it was good to get those things out of the way young, because it definitely helped me realize the important things in life. You know, it's fun to go out and have some beers, and smoking weed. I have no problem with smoking weed. Probably better smoking weed than drinking beer every night. But yeah, I mean, I was young, and my brother was 8 years older than me. His friends were all older than him. So I definitely was kind of in a scene that most kids wouldn't find themselves in, but I feel like it definitely helped mold me into more of a mature, good choice maker as I got older.
It seems like in snowboarding, things are happening. People are seeing you a little bit here and there, and shit's happening at home too. I think around 98-ish, your folks split up. You're at an age that really sucks to have your parents split up. Looking back on it, was that crushing for you? How were you able to power through it?
I was still young, so it was probably a lot easier at a younger age to get through, because I didn't think too much about it. Yeah, you know, when your parents split up, you know, it's a hard thing. You want to be around both of them all the time. And at that point, snowboarding was kind of happening. And when my mom and dad split up, my brother was like, yo, we got to go to Tahoe. Like, Tahoe's the place. You ever heard of Tahoe? Like, we got to go there. Like, the dumps there. It's the sickest. Like, Jim Rippey lives there. Like, all the boys. And so my mom was like, hell yeah. Packed up the house in Girdwood and like moved with me, my brother, and a bunch of his homies from Alaska. And we moved to Tahoe in 98. From there, I just came to a whole new world of snowboarding. And yeah, it was crazy.
When you get there, is it culture shock? Are there like a lot more kids there and everything is different resort wise? You have parks and it's a totally different world for you altogether?
Yeah, it was insane. I mean, Truckee a lot bigger now, but when I moved here, there's about 4,000 people, and there's 13 resorts in a 60-mile radius, and North Star had a park, and Squaw had a park, and Alpine, Boreal. It was insane. I didn't realize it, because the only parks we had in Alaska were at Hilltop and Anchorage. So it was like my first half pipe I ever saw was Anchorage, and first rails and jumps I saw were at Hilltop and Anchorage. And, you know, I come here and everyone's got these massive parks. Yeah, it was definitely wild, because I started off doing USASA. That's probably what got me into it in the beginning, because I did my first contest in Alaska. You know, I qualified to nationals and went to Telluride, won slopestyle that year. From that point, it was like, okay, this is what I want to do. And we get here and there's all these kids doing the same exact thing. And they're like, who's this kid from Alaska? Who's this guy shredding rails and jumps and stuff? And I was stoked, because everything new to me was just something that I wanted to do and get better at. It was crazy. It was definitely a culture shock for sure, just to see like how many people were already doing this and into it and like knew it was happening, and definitely crazy.
You mentioned the USASA. You crushed that for like 5 years. I think you win slopestyle 5 times, maybe 5 in a row. You win the US Open Junior Jam. You win your category at the Bank Slalom. You're just killing it all together. Snowboarding's coming together for you. Before you get to the point where sponsors are coming to you, what are the brands that you think are cool, and what are the products you're riding?
I mean, I feel like most kids at that point were like, yo, Burton, you know, like Burton was a huge part. My first board was a Burton Air 111. I had these sweet pair of Airwalk boots that I rode for like 3 years straight. My favorite riders were riding Burton. And funny thing too, I never wore goggles up until like my second year at Nationals. That was like the first sponsor that kind of like wasn't really a sponsor, but I had met Gus Buckner from Oakley, and he just happened to be there and was like, "Hey man, why aren't you wearing goggles?" And handed me my first pair of goggles right then and there. And from that point, I was like, "Oh, Oakley's the jam." Like, I love Oakley. Like, I started wearing Oakley goggles. And being young, things didn't fit kids back when I started riding like they do now. There's so many fits for kids. Then it was just like anything that fit and worked good for me, I was super stoked on. So that was the jam.
So you pick up Oakley, they create a shit ton of opportunity for you in your career, especially early on. Is that when LibTech comes, and who else is part of your program?
You know, I had a couple little sponsors before. Like, I ended up riding for K2 for like a year.
Who'd you work with there to get on them?
Lou Montgomery was actually working at K2 and was like, "Yo, we want to send you some boards. You're a good person, get on the board." So they sent me boards for a couple years, which was a super rad opportunity. And so I rode those for a couple years, and then ended up meeting up with Chris Seda. He was at Sims at the time, and they got me on Sims. And that was when I moved out to Tahoe. Rode with them for a couple years. This was when like Josh Feliciano and like Jimmy Tomer. That was my introductory to like seeing the scene, because I moved out here and like never really been on a team trip or anything. We went on this team trip to Big Bear with Sims and saw all these big heads doing their thing, and was like, wow, so this is what it is. Neil Provo too, he was like a young kid riding Sims at that time as well. Eric Jackson, one of my homies, you know, like that was a huge part of my life where, I don't know, I felt like things were kind of happening as a young kid, meeting all these people and friends that were riding for the same company. And, you know, I was 11 years old at the time, so it wasn't really fully happening, but went on these trips. Then I like went on this trip to Big Bear and I ended up blowing my knee out at this photo shoot.
You blew your knee at 11. That's crazy.
Yeah. It was on a curve rail. They didn't have the wood protectors between the bars, and just kind of came off early and caught my leg in the bars. And that was kind of like the old check myself, like, yeah, you can get hurt, and snowboarding is a little bit dangerous.
You just have so much stuff happening for you from the time you're 9 till you're 12. You have no childhood. Snowboarding comes in and that becomes everything to you. But it sounds like you're also a derelict kid as well. You're the dude who knows where to get weed, and if it's not at your place, you know where to get it somewhere else. Is that the life you're living at a young age?
Yeah, you know, it was basically just snowboarding for me. Like, I wasn't partying or anything. I just dabbled and tried things that I probably shouldn't have, just because I was around older people. But snowboarding was my thing. That's all I wanted to do was snowboard. You know, riding for somebody at that time when you're that young too, you're not like thinking about the future. You're not thinking about contracts or money. You're just thinking like, cool, man, like someone's sending me a snowboard.
You're just saying yes to anything they want you to do.
Exactly. And it was rad. I was just trying to push myself to keep winning and getting better at snowboarding, and whatever came along with that was whatever came along with it. Being young, you're hungry, and you go and do that and don't really think about anything else.
By the time you're 15, that's like your breakout year. You have a pull-out poster in Snowboarder. You have a checkout article that year. When you get in print at that point, everyone sees you, because that's what the snowboard community looks at as the Bible. You have Transworld, Snowboarder. There was a couple other magazines, but those were the main ones back then. As a young kid, does any of it get to your head? Are you cocky at all as a 15-year-old who's doing well in snowboarding?
You know, I don't think I was ever cocky at that point. I just always was super hyped. I had no foundation for what I was going to do. Like, I wanted to ride everything. I wanted to ride pipe. I wanted to ride park. I wanted to ride rails. I wanted to do whatever. The year for me that changed everything, E-Jack was riding for LibTech and was like, yo, man, like, I could introduce you to Janine James at LibTech. And they're like, oh, yeah, we're going to send you some snowboards. And, you know, they sent me some boards, and they brought me out to the bank slalom. And I ended up winning that year the bank slalom. And that was also the year I won the junior jam. That was my like last year doing nationals, and I won slopestyle there. And I just wanted to compete. And competing wasn't a sign of like being better than anybody. It was just something for me that made me feel good, to prove to myself that like I was progressing and doing better. And it was like 2003. Yeah. So I was 13. And the next couple of years, things just kind of started to change a little bit.
Now it is time for me to take a sponsor break, and my first sponsor is Evo. And they have supported me since day one, and I've shopped there since the day they opened their doors. They have all the great brands, the most knowledgeable and approachable staff, and they know what they're doing when it comes to boot fits, ski and snowboard tunes. They're really good at service. And when I don't feel like leaving the house, I get my stuff through evo.com. They have the same deals, but with free shipping on orders over $50, a no-hassle return policy, and a low price guarantee. And for listening to the show, I've got a new deal from Evo for you on all Evo branded products. They make some amazing stuff. I've been using their ski poles that are just as good as my $100 poles, but I paid a fraction of the price for them, and their offering is a whole lot more than just ski poles. When you head over to evo.com and check out, enter the code POWEL20, that's all one word and the number 20, no spaces, and you'll get 20% off of all Evo branded products. And when you do it, because Evo is made of good and inclusive people, they're going to give an additional 2% of all branded sales to local youth organizations. They're helping you have fun and making a difference in the community. Next up, it's Stanley. They are the brand that invented the keep things hot and cold category back in 1913, and they are located down the street from my house in Seattle. You remember Stanley from that green bottle that kept your grandpa's coffee hot all day long. They still do that, and so much more. When I think about Stanley, it's all about water bottles and pint glasses. The water bottle is a simple classic Stanley style that keeps my water cold for a couple more hours than whatever you put your water in. The pint glass keeps my beer ice cold way longer than I need it to, and the beveled edge makes me hydrate faster for some reason. It just feels good, and you're going to want to feel good too. To do that, head on over to stanley-pmi.com, go shopping, and you will get 30% off your entire order when you use the code TPM30. That's all one word, the number 30. When you check out, you'll get that 30% off. Everything you buy helps support the show, so please do that. Now we're going to jump back into the podcast. 2005 is the year of the Community Project, which is like the biggest budget snowboard film ever, and you're involved with that. You're like 15. Is that when you're starting to see money and being part of crazy things that you never thought you'd be part of?
I wasn't seeing a tremendous amount of money because I was a young kid, but I was getting like a couple $1,000 here from Oakley, and I wasn't getting paid by anybody else. My mom, we didn't have a lot when we moved to Tahoe, and she was just such a huge support system for me that she would make it happen regardless. Drive me here, drive me there. For me, if I had to get to the mountain, I'd hitchhike to the hill, whatever I had to do. And then once again, Oakley, meeting Gus Buckner at Nationals, got me my first pair of goggles, right? And then like a couple years later, one of my friends from Alaska who lived with us, Chris Bronze, was like, yo, I know this guy. Like, let me hit him up. And Gus is like, oh yeah, I remember that kid. And like ended up sending me a little box of stuff. And when Gus Buckner went out, Maddie Swanson came in, and he was a huge part of doing a lot for me. I had a huge support system outside of my mom who would make it happen with what we had. But then like Community Project came around, and I was still doing all these contests. And, you know, we had this talk. Maddie Swanson was the team manager at the time. He's like, we're doing the Community Project. You're the young guy. You're going to film with us. And my mom helped me get a snowmobile, started going out with freaking Travis and JJ and Zach Leach. And those guys all fully changed my mind on what snowboarding was, or kind of where I wanted to go. And that year definitely put me in this point where I wanted to start like riding powder, where I started wanting to free ride, started wanting to get out of contests and start filming. Because growing up watching snowboard videos, I feel like that's everybody's dream, is to film a video part. So that was a quintessential year, was the Community Project, 100%. After that, I mean, things definitely started to change money-wise, but still it wasn't till later that I could put back to snowboarding on my own.
You had been competing for 5-6 years already. You get the big opportunity to film, and the Community Project is a huge project. The next big one for you is you start working with Standard. And as a kid who doesn't have access to much out in Alaska, I would think Standard is some of the movies that you are seeing out there. And is that one of those things that's game-changing too, where you're like, this is the biggest opportunity I'll ever have?
Absolutely. I got to meet Mike and Dave Hatchett. at a young age, and they were kind of like, we're looking for these young Grammies to come shred. And at that time it was like Luke Matrani and Freddie Osbo and Mikkel Bang, and they all have the Grom section in the standard movie. And like, that was kind of like the year that it asked me to like come out and ride, but I didn't really understand what they needed or what it was really to like go film a video part. Community project, it was like, all right, you ride for Oakley, you're on the team, this is going to be this big team family movie. So for that, it was just kind of an introduction. Met them, filmed with them a couple times, but nothing really flourished from that. There was no like shots in the movie. Really, the first movie that I really put time in to a video part was with The Constant Struggle, and that was Mongo Productions. That was Kyle Clancy's production company. Kurt Morgan was the one editing all of that. Jared Slater and Greg Wheeler, those guys were filming and editing, and that was like my young, all right, put time in, drive here, go out with these guys, listen to what they're telling you, and film a part. And I was like able to like film this 3-minute part with those guys, and that like kind of like put me in the vibe of, okay, this is what I got to do. And then once again, went out, shot with Standard the next year and got a couple shots in Aesthetica. Huge for me. You know, it was like 2 or 3 shots, but it was sick, dude. I'm filming with my heroes because at that time it was like Mac Dog and Standard.
Yeah.
They were the biggest. So my mindset 100% changed from community project year was a huge changer, and Constant Struggle filming with Mongo Pro was the one that really fired me up and taught me what I needed to do to go out and make that shit happen.
It involves you work with Brain Farm. That's it. That's all. One of the most important snowboard movies that there is. And with the project that Travis Rice is on, I've heard from a lot of people that it's different than a lot of movies where there are high expectations and strong work ethics. How do you fit into that mix, especially as the younger dude?
It's a huge production. So that was definitely a different realm for me. You know, I was young. Travis actually invited me to the natural selection, and I was like 17 years old, and did that contest, ended up getting like 6th. And Travis was like, yo, man, can you like stick around? We're going to shoot for a couple weeks. You and Lando, I need you guys to stick around. And had 3 weeks hanging out in Jackson with those guys. And that was a huge wake up call, you know, where snowboarding was going and also like what expectations were going out to film. So, you know, it was like a super big learning curve for me going out and doing that. And like, yeah, insane cinematography, insane crews. There was so much going on. There were so many people shooting, so many people out there building, massive crews. Such a different vibe than going out and shooting with Kyle and those guys, because we had small little crews, and seeing that woke me up to like what was happening and how big these snowboard movies were getting and where snowboarding was going. So that was huge for me. Super thankful to even have the opportunity to do that. And those guys took me under their wing. You know, I was super young. Like most kids aren't going out at 17 and snowmobiling in the backcountry in Jackson at that age. And that was definitely a big part of what helped me move forward from that point and do my own thing.
You're, I think, around 18 years old. I've read places that you're punk rock, and I don't even know what that means anymore. So what kind of 18-year-old are you off the snow? What kind of shit are you into? Are you smoking a ton of weed? Are you partying a lot? Are you going out? Who are you at that point?
At that age, I probably wasn't going out a lot at all. I definitely smoked a lot of weed. It was a good thing. I was super mellow, just like to smoke weed, but I was definitely a little shit. Definitely didn't like to be told what to do. I hated cockiness. That always pissed me off. And like people who just think they're the shit or whatever. I'd always have some smart aleck comment to say. And, you know, people would be like, settle down, settle down. But I wanted that opportunity to go out and film all year. I wanted to have that backing to go out and do what a lot of riders were doing at that point. But I felt like I was still young. I didn't have all the resources to do what I was dreaming to do. And so, yeah, I was a little, I guess maybe like jaded, not jaded, but like, come on, man, give me the opportunity. Like, what the fuck? I want to go out and shred. Like, I'm going to wake up early. I'm going to go out. I'm going to fucking ride this line. I'm going to help build this jump. I'm going to be there as a crew. I'm going to help. But when you're young, things come off different. Not everyone sees a young, smart aleck kid as somebody, they don't see that feeling, they see it more as you're just a punk kid.
You can be looked at as a liability who on any trip could be that dude that gets you kicked out of the restaurant or the hotel or the whatever. I mean, based on I was a team manager for a long time. And talent is one thing, but if you can't be somewhat professional, even if you have an attitude, that can be a detriment. You look at that as maybe hurting you back then, or maybe if you were with the team a little bit more, things might have happened faster for you.
Possibly. When you're young, you don't think as much to those things, but I was around so many people that were good mentors, and they could put me in the right direction and tell me when I needed to cool it or when I need to keep my mouth shut or whatever it be. But I feel like you definitely need to keep your head on and do a little more than just snowboard. There's a lot more to it being a professional snowboarder than just snowboarding, you know? So that for me was a huge learning process at a young age. And so, yeah, being a punk, that's how I grew up. That's how I saw snowboarding. So for me, I was being me. I was being myself. But yeah, maybe that might have hurt me in some ways, but in other ways, I think people saw that I was being real, and that was part of why people wanted to stick with me as well at that time. So I don't regret anything. You know, being a kid is funny.
What thing did you do that you were just like such a smart ass or something that might have been so funny at the time? Do you look back at it and was like, maybe not the best move on my part?
Oh, I don't know. There's definitely a few, and it's probably later in time, but probably just being a smart ass and calling people out on their shit for being ass kissers, maybe a little too much. That was part of snowboarding I hated. I hated ass kissing, and I hated people who were willing to say and do whatever they wanted to get a little bit ahead. And I might have been a little nonchalant at calling them out, but maybe like my passive aggressiveness was getting the best of me in that way. But there was a couple times. I don't think I like really did anything in particular at any one point in my career that I could say really hindered me, but there's definitely a couple occasions where I should have kept my mouth shut or got a little too drunk and said something I shouldn't have, but shit happens.
Yeah. Speaking of drinking, you turned 21 around 2011-ish. You're back with Standard, and you're also hitting the North Face Masters contest. Are you doing them just because you like to do that kind of riding, or is there some money to them, or how do you end up going from the contests you were doing to the Freeride World Tour-ish events?
So it's funny. I was 20 when I filmed my opening segment with Standard.
That's the storming?
Yeah, that's the storming, exactly. And that year was a huge year for me. You know, I put a lot of time in. I worked super hard. I spent a ton of money. Fuck, I spent all my money going helling to put out the best part I could.
So that's all out of your pocket? Your sponsors aren't giving you much money then? You're 20, 21 years old?
I had a travel budget, but the money that I had saved up, I had thrown in, was able to pay for a couple of these trips, you know, and luckily for me, I had made them super worth it and got a bunch of shots and made the trips worthy of the money I spent. And I got some money back. I had a travel budget out of it. I definitely spent the money. There was help there, 100%. But some people might feel, I don't know, reluctant to spend that much money to go helling. And for me, the opportunity to go film with some of my favorite riders with my favorite film company was a no-brainer. So I was going to go and do that. So that year I filmed, and then they told me I was getting opening part. You know, I was so fired up, and I was like, all right, things are happening. And the next year, move up to Bellingham. I'm living in Pat McCarthy's house. He's renting to me, and I go and I hurt my knee skateboarding before the winter starts. And I'm like freaking out because I'm like planning on filming all the next year, doing the same thing again. And I got all this help. All these sponsors are coming in like, all right, here's your contract. We're going to bump it up to this, you know? So there's all these expectations to go out and throw out a banger part. And like, I blow out my knee and fracture my tibial plateau. And I'm super stressed out. And this is like 3 months before the year is like getting going. And I had done big mountain contests prior when I was younger, and my first one I won when I was 16 here in Tahoe was like the Super Free Skiing Championships, and they had like the snowboard category. I won that. I really wanted to do that at that point, but then they made it so you had to be 18 so you could actually compete in these events. So I just was like, screw it. Back to Washington, you know, I'm hurt. I'm super stressed out. The winter's starting. I want to film. and I can't really film. And LibTech hits me up and they're like, yo, we're sponsoring these North Face Masters events. We're going to get you into these. Do you want to do them? And I'm like, hell yeah, sure. I think I could do these. And the first one wasn't until like February or something like that. So I was like, all right, I'm going to get my knee back. I'm going to get it strong. I'm going to do what I can. So it's rehabbing and doing everything I could. And I did 5 months of rehab on my like fractured tibial plateau, and I partially tore my ACL. I was like, all right, I can do this, and ended up going to Crystal Mountain for the first one and getting second. And it was like, okay, this is rad. And after that contest, they're like, yo, so this is all going to be a qualifier for the Freeride World Tour. And I was like, oh shit, really? Okay. Like, had no idea, and was just like, hell yeah. So I'm going to put in my time and do these contests, and I'm going to go ride a day or two, and my knee would hurt, and then I'd be okay a week later, and I'd go ride and get my run in and make it happen. And I was able to like go to Snowbird at the end of the year, win that. And I ended up winning the overall for that. And they're like, yo, so you're qualified to the tour. That's how it all started for the tour for me. So it was a crazy year of being hurt, being super bummed, not being able to like put everything into filming, and barely making it happen on this bum ass knee, and then qualifying to the tour. After that year was when things kind of changed a lot sponsors wise, but I was focused. I was going to the tour. So like I knew what I was doing from that point on. So whole crazy big roller coaster of change in my life, getting hurt, moving. That was when I had my first kid that year too. So there's like a whole ton of things going on that I'd never experienced in my life. And it was just kind of like going through the motions without knowing what was happening, just trying to deal with it the best I could.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at your life at that point, you are 22 years old-ish. Your sponsors, for some reason, aren't sticking by you because you didn't really put out movie parts, and you're going to go to the Freeride World Tour. I'm not sure if you're married at this point, but do you end up having an unplanned pregnancy?
For sure, yeah. I mean, me and my lady had been together since I was 16.
Oh, dang.
And we had like a little falling out for a year. We got back together. We moved up to Washington. This was after the storming, and I felt like things were happening, and then had a kid. Unplanned, but as soon as I found out, I was on board. I was like, sweet, let's do this. We're going to have a kid. Even though I was super scared, being young, it's the scariest thing in the world.
It's scary when you're old, too. I've been in that situation.
Yeah, right. And so unplanned or not, it was one of those things that I was like, all right, I'm going to put all my effort into this. This is my kid. Not going to give up on that. I'm not going to give up on snowboarding. This is what I'm going to keep doing. We had our kid. Then we got married. We moved back to Tahoe, and the tour was my saving grace in a way. Sponsors were definitely, I don't know, when team managers go out of brands and new ones come in, and sometimes I feel like certain relationships help because they know who you are and what you're trying to do. And some people are looking more at business aspect of it all and what they think you're doing. And I feel like some people thought I wasn't trying or something, but realistically, you know, first time I got hurt and wasn't able to like fulfill my filming obligations, I was scared. Like I'd seen people hurt in the past, and it affected their contracts with their sponsors the following year. And for me, that happened with Oakley. And it's like I qualified for the tour, and then they're like, yeah, we're not going to be able to support you anymore. And that was, I don't know, wake up call, but also at the same time was a heartbreaker because that was my first sponsor. The one who brought me to where I was, kind of introduced me to everybody, gave me that opportunity to meet other people in snowboarding and people who helped me get to where I am today. So it was a scary time, you know, like young, having a kid, hurt, not fulfilling obligations in a business that's pretty cutthroat. It was a crazy time being young and dealing with all that.
It's time for me to take my last sponsor break, and the brand I want to talk about is Spy Optic. They're a brand that I'm so happy to have involved with the show because not only do they have an incredible collection of sunglasses, but it's time to think winter, and Spy has been supporting all things snow since they started 25 years ago. Now, they have rad signature collections, game-changing technologies, and all their goggles have the Happy Lens, which really sets Spy apart from everyone else. And that's a big reason why you should be wearing Spy. The biggest reason to me that you should wear them is that Spy's goggles look better than everyone else's. I always think the other brands will catch up and fit and finish, but they don't. Spy's look better, and you will look better wearing them. For listening to the podcast, I'm going to make it easier than ever for you to get a pair of Spy sunglasses or goggles. All you need to do is head over to spyoptic.com, do your shopping, and when you check out, you'll get 20% off when you enter the code POWEL20, that's all one word with the number 20, and you're done. You're supporting the show, and you're going to look better than you ever have before. My next sponsor is the Summit at Snoqualmie. They should be the choice for all Seattle skiers and snowboarders, as they are our local mountain. And here's why you should go there. There's no long road trips that waste a lot of your weekend getting to and from the mountain when you head to the summit. It's only 45 minutes away, and when you get there, you will never be turned around because the mountain has no parking for you. On top of that, the terrain is awesome. There are 4 mountains to choose from, tubing, and no big corporate pass programs that create huge lift lines. It's the smart choice for those that don't like wasting time. To find out more about getting a season pass or just a daily lift ticket, head on over to summitatsnoqualmie.com and they will have all that information for you. My final sponsor is the 10 Barrel Brewery out of Bend, Oregon. They brew my favorite Northwest beers, and their cocktails in a can pack a punch and feature the best craft spirits. But what really separates 10 Barrel from its competition is that they live and breathe action sports. This is no bullshit. While a lot of brands want you to believe that they support snow because it's perceived as cool, 10 Barrel lives and breathes this, and they put their money where their mouth is. This year, they produced a snowboard movie, Hold My Beer. They produced a ski movie, Watch This. They'll have a series of hella big air events, and they'll donate a percentage of sales of their seasonal Pray for Snow beer to protect our winners. They really do drink beer outside, and you can find out more about their drinking outside adventures over at 10barrel.com. Those are my sponsors. Now let's get back into the podcast. Before you get dropped, are you making any significant money? Are you making more than like 20, 30 grand a year snowboarding?
For sure, yeah. Oakley was paying me a decent chunk of money and supporting me traveling when I could. LibTech came in and definitely helped me out. They were my biggest supporter, 100%. Love those guys to this day. They helped me with everything, but they gave me a big chunk. Zach Leach was the team manager. It was his last year too, moving out, but he's like, we're signing a 3-year deal. I want to make sure you get paid. I want to make sure you're locked in and you're safe. So he brought me in, signed a 3-year deal. I was making a good amount of money. I was able to support myself and my kids and start trying to do this new chapter of life, doing the Freeride World Tour, which was totally new to me. You know, it was coming up the next season, obviously, but I had the support of LibTech at that point, and I was looking for other sponsors. I wasn't super worried about what was going to happen financially. I was just, I'm going to get strong and I'm going to snowboard. I didn't think about the money. But yeah, financially, I was doing all right.
Is there a point when maybe LibTech ends and you've already lost Oakley? Do you think that maybe your days of making an income through snowboarding is done?
Most definitely. I was doing well on the tours my first year. Came to Kirkwood for like the 3rd stop of the tour, the 4th stop. I think I got like 2nd place, and I got 3rd place in the one before in Chamonix. Oakley was already off. LibTech was still there, and LibTech had like given me a call, and this was when Quicksilver had their hands tied into the company, and got a call from Pete. You know, they were just like, yo, man, congratulations. Like, we're super stoked. And then like, I kind of felt like this weird call coming. My contract wasn't even up then, but they're like, we're going to have to cut your contract. This is a clause that Quicksilver had put into their deal where basically when they were done with the company, they could do what they wanted. So like a lot of people were on the chopping block at that point, and I was definitely one of those people on the chopping block. So that came as a big surprise. Right from then and there, all my financial backing from LibTech, which was like my only one at the time, was gone. Fortunately for me, Pat McCarthy, I'd been talking to him prior in the year, and he was like, yeah, we're starting this Glacier brand, and we want you to be part of it. We want you to be our big mountain guy. And automatically I was like, that sounds super rad. And hadn't had an opportunity to like ride for like a rad outerwear brand, you know. It was like Oakley. I rode what they made, which wasn't the best outerwear, but they supported me and, you know, they did their best. But that was a huge part of my focus on the tour because I had all these things happening that were like super hard to deal with at that time. It just made me want to ride harder and like focus more on doing this to the fullest. And at that point, I was scared of what was going to happen. I was young, having a kid, put a big hurting on my financial situation, and just being that I had to be gone all the time, and these things that I had to do to be able to support them and myself just made no sense at the time. So that was a tough time in life for sure. But I definitely felt like I might have to find something else to do. I might have to look towards a new career, even though like I was still young, thinking this is what I've worked my whole life towards. I can't stop snowboarding now.
So what do you do to make money at that point? Is that when you start washing windows and working on Christmas trees? Because at that point, all the income from snowboarding is done. You're still super young. You're set up to be doing really well on this tour. You have the backing of Pat, but what are you doing for money?
So at that point, I was doing nothing for money. I was a total dirtbag, and I was basically relying on doing my best in these contests. It was such a very quick transition in a way, because Pat came in, they gave me what they could, which helped a little bit, but it was really like winning these contests, like brought in a chunk of money for me and was able to like kind of bring me out of this slump. And then a couple years later, after doing the tour stuff and like bringing in some money and getting a little more backing from 686 and linking up with Smith, Nate Farrell was the team manager at Smith. They were able to help me out, throw me a couple bucks, cruising on their program, and that kept me afloat. You know, we didn't need much to make things happen, but definitely wasn't enough. So yeah, I started washing windows, started doing the Christmas tree lighting, and I was like, I'm focused. I'm going to go dominate these contests and try to bring in some money. It was definitely tight living and a lot of like pressure on myself to go out and like do my best competing to bring in some money for the off season to keep it going. So that was the whole change in my focus, you know, as being more responsible as a snowboarder and an adult, and take it real serious, not take anything for granted. The first year competing, put it into perspective. I can do this, but I also need to be a real person, work a real job. I can't just live this dream life. Snowboarding is not going to pay for everything, you know?
Yeah, I mean, you say dominate, and dominate you had, I think the first year, the one you did like 6 events, you get a first, second, third, 2 fourths, and a 10th out of the gate. Then the next year, it's like you win 2 out of 3 events. On paper, it looks like you're lining up for a championship season. And then are there no more events that season, or what happens?
You know, I was trying to do too much. I still wanted to film and also compete. I had an opportunity in between events to go out and film, and it was like second day out filming, and I ended up fracturing my tibial plateau again out in Jackson, and it was just like super heartbreaker because I was committed. I was ready to win the tour that year. I like wanted to go out and dominate, and yeah, hurt myself. Wasn't able to finish the year. So basically what I did was like come home and boom, right back into rehab and getting my knee strong, making sure I could come back and do good the next season. So it was trying to balance those two things at once, and got super unlucky. And it's one of those types of sports. Anything can happen on any given day. And it just so happened that it happened like mid-season, wasn't able to finish out. So it was a bummer.
You were able to get yourself healthy for 2015. You dominate that year as well. I think it's 2 firsts, a third, a fifth, a 10th. 2016 rolls around, it's more the same. You have like 3 wins and a fifth. You're the overall tour champion. Looking back on the road that it took to get to the top of that podium, does it mean more than one would imagine based on all the shit that you've been through?
I feel like it meant way more to me. All the filming and stuff was great. It built my pride up, you know, work hard. You see your hard work at the end of the year, but a lot of that goes unnoticed, the hard work and stuff. And people don't see the hard work, I feel like. And yeah, I mean, it's snowboarding. I never looked at it as a job in that way. Whereas I was just like, I'm going to go out and shred, you know, I'm going to go out and film. I'm going to do a part. Oh, these people are going to help me out. That's rad. Oh, sweet. They're giving me some money. That's cool. But like when you hit your low and you start seeing the reality of life, doing the tour and stuff and having those tour years cut short. And, it took me 3 years of competing on the tour to finally crack that overall, which I worked hard for, because it's such a consistency thing, keeping it going and winning. And you get one run in these events, and you're traveling all over the world and spending this money to go do one run. So getting your head in the right mindset. So like finally that 4th year doing the tour and finally winning that, like that felt good, because like I had the backing for sure of 686. Libtech had came back actually because they said they would after the Quicksilver deal, and they had come back and they had helped me out because they had said they were going to, and they did, and they're fucking rad. And I really appreciated that. But it was the hard work just on my side of staying focused and like being confident in myself and like finally winning that tour after all that, like getting hurt a couple years or just missing the overall by a minuscule amount of points. It was such a fucking hell yeah. And then like a fuck you to like kind of everyone else who hated on me and didn't believe that anything was going to happen, and was able to just keep it rolling into the next 2 seasons and win it again and again. And like, I put it all on me. Having the support was rad, but with the tour stuff, it was work hard and focus and you shall prevail. And that was how it was. And so it felt really good. It was definitely way different than going out and filming a video part and getting love from your bros. It was like, all right, I can be stoked on what I did for myself because I did it for myself. Even if people were like, fuck the Freeride World Tour or whatever, like that shit's tough, dude. It ain't easy. And to be able to go out and give it your all and deal with a bunch of other things that a lot of people don't even know you're dealing with and be able to do that just made it that much better. It was huge for me.
You made it look easy. I think the next year you win 4 out of 5 Freeride World Tour events. Another year, another championship. Going into the 3rd year, you've crushed it on the tour 2 years in a row. Do you feel extra pressure for you? Like in every contest you go to, are there more eyeballs on you and do a lot more people know who you are?
Yeah, definitely. And, you know, as the tour gets bigger too, more people are focusing on that. More people are watching. And then, you know, the tour and all their media, they definitely put a lot of pressure on you. And they're like, can you win again? Can you do it again? And went to Japan, and, you know, on my 3rd year, I got like hurt my knee, and I was like, oh, fuck, dude. Like, what am I going to do? Like, my knee's hurt. All right, I'm going to take it mellow. Like, went to Canada for the next stop, took it mellow, got 4th, and then let my knee heal and was able to pull a win out. I put myself in that mindset that I had been like the years prior, which was like, you're hurt, but you know your body, you know what you have to do. Like, this is what you're going to do regardless of the pressure and the expectations people put on you. And I was able to like somehow pull it off in Verbier. And I don't know, something about those contests that put you in that mindset. You block everything out. And I feel like pressure sometimes is a good thing. It makes you pull out all the stops, I guess, a little bit. So yeah, I mean, there was a lot of pressure, but at the same time, I was also stoked because I just wanted to go out and have fun. If I lost, I wasn't going to be bummed. I had won 2 years in a row, which was not even in my mindset. So at that point, whatever happens, happens. And being able to pull off that 3rd one, that was all just blocking all those expectations and media bullshit out of there and going back to the hard moments of my life, you know, losing sponsors from being hurt and having kids and trying to turn your life, turn it around in a new direction and change things for the better. But people put a lot of pressure on you. It's crazy.
Yeah, I think you're one of 2 3-time Freeride World Tour champions, and in Europe, it's much bigger of a deal than it is over here in the States. Are you more recognized, and do people know who you are in Europe compared to events here, or is it still just like a Freeride World Tour guy that people aren't really sure who he is?
And Europe is most definitely bigger, with Xavier being the quintessential big mountain rider from Europe who was crushing these events and the shit. Everyone in the U.S. knew who he was. So like when I started doing it, I was like, oh yeah, there's going to be some type of following. But Europe, there was a lot more love. And then these last 3 years, I felt like it's getting so much bigger. People definitely recognize a little more, and there's more opportunities for people to do these contests. There's more coverage around it. So people are definitely seeing it a lot more here in the U.S. now. So I feel like it wasn't at first, and now it's becoming more popular. And I'm definitely seeing people noticing more what I'm doing here in the U.S. than they used to. So it's pretty cool to see how much it's changed. It's going to be my 8th season this next season, and the change from the first year to this year is huge.
With the Freeride World Tour, everyone's had that experience where they've spent probably $2-3 grand minimum to get where they're going. You're halfway across the world. The conditions just suck. And the event, people want this event to be pulled off. When you have your one run, it's not always ideal. Are there some events where you just don't want to be a part of?
The tour does a great job can't say anything bad. They do the best they can. They do want to run these contests in the best conditions possible. It can be a really tough decision to make for them. Last year was one of them. It was like Andorra. There's a lot of money involved in these events, and it's hard to schedule them based on the weather.
It's a crapshoot, man. They're not God.
Yeah, I mean, they're planning these events, almost a year in advance, with the dates and stuff. So it's kind of like luck of the draw when it comes to the weather and the conditions. But based on what you said, yeah, I mean, there's events, a lot of us sit down and we talk about it and we make sure that our voices are heard, but there's only so much you can do. And people have to have their points and they have to get a contest off. And some people didn't have a good contest the time before, so they need that opportunity to get that next podium. They have to run an event, and it's tough. Like, you fly across the world and you want it to be the best conditions possible. You want it to be POW, you want it to be stable, you want it to be sunny, but it doesn't always work out that way. So that's a huge mind fuck right there, 100%. Especially like if you're at home and it's going off and it's dumping and you're going somewhere where the snowpack is low, you're kicking yourself like, what am I doing? Like,
yep.
But you're committed to this tour, you're committed to competing, so you have to commit to that and make it happen. So yeah, it's been a conflict.
What do you win in one of those? First, if you win an event, what's the check? And then what's the check for the overall tour champion?
That's the hard part right there. It used to be like $6,000 for a win.
$6,000?
Yeah, which isn't a huge amount.
Not for the pinnacle event of a sport.
No, absolutely. But it's $6,000. It used to be $6,000. Now snowboarders only get $4,000 for a win.
Do skiers get more?
Skiers get more, for sure.
Oh, the tides have turned.
Oh, yeah.
There was one day when you guys were way cooler.
Oh, we're still cooler. Always will be. There's more skiers, so they base it off of the amount of skiers in the event and the opportunity to actually win. Whereas when you look at it, more snowboarders may come out with more money than one skier who does well in one of the events out of the whole season. Everyone gets money to come, but you're buying your own plane ticket. You're most of the time buying all your own food, everything. Given a couple events help out, they have breakfast and dinner included. Most of the events are show up. We have your lodging dialed for the days the contests are happening. And then when the contest is over, you're out of your place. Find your lodging, find your food, whatever.
That's even worse because you're traveling with a ton of gear and they're saying get lodging up until the night before the event, lug all your gear to your hotel for the event, then lug all your gear somewhere else the next morning because you can't stay there anymore.
Exactly. And then people buy their tickets based on these weather windows. And so they buy a ticket for a 10-day trip. The contest goes off in 3 days, and then you're left there with 5 days to spare, without lodging, tickets to ride, any food or anything like that. So, people, they have a conflict of, do I change my ticket? Do I stay and ride? And it's definitely a tough one, So it's hard to schedule your trips based on looking at the weather and stuff. You never know what's going to happen. So usually I'll try to buy my ticket based on the weather window, try to stay there, and then always hope for the weather window to be pushed. Hopefully it's snowing for 4 days and you get 4 or 5 days in your hotel, and then it opens up sunny 2 days before the weather window ends, and then you got a day or two to figure out going home. And at that point you're all right. But yeah, sometimes it can be totally messed up for everybody, For the horses, which are you guys. Exactly. So it's interesting, but that's always the hard part. Financially, it's hard for people to do. A lot of these guys are normal people who are ripping snowboarders. They're not like the top dogs in snowboarding making all this money. They're guys who work their asses off in the summer. They're badass snowboarders. They come out and they do the same thing and they make all their money in the summer so they can come and do this all winter long. So kudos to the guys we compete with. The tour does the best to make the best conditions for everybody, but you can't control the weather and you can't control the conditions. So you just got to kind of bite the bullet sometimes and do what you got to do.
Well, another thing you can't control is something that I call inappropriate questions. What that is how I end the podcast and I get someone that you know to ask 3 inappropriate questions. The person that I got to ask you the questions has come up on the podcast already. Patrick McCarthy, a dude who you filmed with back in the day, you're working with at 686, and I had him ask you 3 inappropriate questions. I'm going to cue them up. I hope my battery on this iPad is going to last to play them for you. And I'm going to go with inappropriate question number 1 from Pat right now.
What is the craziest Alaskan thing you've ever witnessed in your life?
Oh my God, the craziest Alaskan thing I've ever witnessed. There's been a lot of crazy Alaskan things. I guess it'd be, wow, a big one right there. Probably the parties my mom threw at the house in Girdwood at Twin Peaks. Always the craziest shit went down at Twin Peaks.
Well, you can't just say the craziest shit. What does that mean?
I think I was too young to really experience, but probably...
I mean, you can't throw it out there if you can't think of what the craziest shit is. Were people being thrown off balconies, total debauchery? What are we talking about? Craziest shit.
Well...
You're going to disappoint Patrick.
I can't even say, really. Probably involved people that I don't want to say.
What happened? You don't have to say who it was.
Oh, man.
You're not doing very well with this question. You want to go to question number 2?
It kind of involves my mom, so I don't really want to throw that one out there.
All right. We'll leave your mom out of this, and I will go to question number 2. Maybe you can give us a better answer here. Here we go.
What is the wildest night you've had after a win on the Freeride World Tour?
The wildest night after a Freeride World Tour win? Let's see. Probably wasn't after a win. Let's say it was on the Freeride World Tour. This was probably after an event got canceled. Me and the boys packed up our shit and we went and sent it super hard. We were in Geneva and we knew we needed to get to Austria for the next event. So we got on a train from Geneva wasted and got to our friend's house in Innsbruck. And we're like, we're going to party all night and we're going to send it on the train the next day to the hotel in Fieberbrunn. And we'll have a place to stay, right? So we go out, freaking go to the reggae bar, go super hard there. We go to the strip club with our boy. He's got an ear infection. He's never been to a strip club. He's 20. So we all buy him a lap dance. We send him in, bring him out, big smiles on his face. I won't mention the other things that happened, but we get on a train. We're like, we're going to stay up all night. So we get on the train 6 a.m. in Innsbruck, and we send it all the way to Fieberbrunn because we're going to get into our hotel. We're like, we're going to check in that next day. And we get there, show up, just totally wasted. And we're like, yeah, we're checking into our rooms. Like, yeah, your rooms aren't going to be ready till tomorrow. So we all just pass out in the lobby till the afternoon, until they basically were like, you guys got to get out of here. So we got all our bags and shit just kind of like laying in the hotel, and we're just piles of shit. And that was probably one of the biggest, heaviest nights that we've had.
Is that type of traveling circus the way the Freeride World Tour is with you and the crew when you're on the road? Maybe not that hard all the time by any means?
Just the wolf pack. Just the wolf pack. Yeah, not everyone does that. Everyone's a little more clean cut, but the boys that I usually travel with are some of my best friends, and we have a good time. So we make sure to like stick together and have a good time and make things happen. Budget, but fun. And, you know, we're never going to steer away from a good time. Actually, I add in one of the best POW days of all time happened in between that trip, but we can get to that another time.
All right. Well, we will go with the last inappropriate question here.
How young were you the first time you sold someone weed?
Oh, man. You know, what's funny is like, I never sold weed. I never was a weed seller. It was probably like 15. Me and my buddy, we decided, hey, man, like, we can make some money here. So we bought an ounce of weed for super cheap. And we split it up. We eyeballed it. You could sell eighths for $50 at that time. Got a bag for $2.50. Sold every eighth for $50 an eighth, and made like $400. And that was not the start of my weed selling, but one of my good buddies' weed selling. And I shouldn't be saying it. I'm not throwing anybody with us. No names. But yeah, probably about 15. But we were heavy weed smokers. That's all we did. We weren't even party animals. There was no drugs.
Do you smoke spliffs?
Oh, no, never. I didn't even smoke tobacco. It was like straight bong tokes and doobies all day. Had a big plethora of glass. I always collected. It was like bubblers and bongs and things like that. I had a hookah we called Pepe Le Pew. And all the homies would just come over and we'd just smoke that thing and play video games and watch snowboard videos like all day, all night.
Did you wear hemp necklaces with glass in them and stuff like that?
I wore hemp necklaces actually probably before I even started smoking weed, which is funny. But no, I was just kind of grubby. Didn't take showers and just smoked a lot of pure weed and enjoyed the greenery for what it was. Till the spliffs came in and they got real addictive. And from there, it's what can you do?
I think it's great. I think everybody should do it way too much, and I am hoping to get a weed sponsor one day. That's me personally, but whatever. It's not about me, it's about you, and that's the end of the podcast. Looking at your career, it's like you had two different careers. A film career, everybody lost faith in you, then people gained faith in you, then you were able to be successful again. Xavier's the only other dude who's won it 3 times. You're 30, and it seems like in this world, the older you are and the more knowledge you are is not a bad thing. So it'll be exciting to see how this year works out for you.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Yeah, I'm only 30, so I'm not too old yet, not too young, right where I want to be. And yeah, man, I appreciate it all, no doubt. Keep it going. Snowboarding for life, no matter what.
So that was time with Sammy Luebke, and this is an interesting one for me. The first question I came away with was, why did he tell me that the guy that he brought to the strip club had an ear infection? While I love a good strip club story, I'm left wondering how the dude's ear did during the lap dance. Did his eardrum explode? Did fluid shoot out of it? And did that cause instant relief for him? Who knows? The other thing about this podcast that I thought was a little different was that while I did get to know Sammy a little bit, and he seems like a cool guy, I feel like I get to know a lot of my other guests even better. Sammy's wasn't an in-person interview. About half of the podcasts I do are. And while that always makes the podcast better in terms of chemistry, the ones on FaceTime or Skype are just as good for getting to know the person. But I still feel like I didn't get to know Sammy as well as I did some of my other guests. Maybe we'll have a beer one day and that'll all work itself out. Sammy has had a crazy career, including a lot more drama, ups and downs, sponsor issues, and kids than most professionals out there, and he is still on top. So, 2 different careers for Sammy Luebke, both as successful as they can possibly be. And this year, Sammy could be the first 4-time Freeride World Tour champion. Based on his results over the past 8 years, that's not a long shot, but that is the podcast for this week. I want to thank everyone for listening. Ask you to review me on whatever platform you listen to me on. And this is something I ask every week. And based on the reviews coming in, not too many of you are doing it. I know it's an extra step, but it really does take a minute to do, and it's greatly appreciated. Finally, I want to thank my sponsors who make this thing happen. They are Evo, Stanley, Spy Optic, the 10 Barrel Brewery, and the Summit at Snoqualmie. Have a great week, everyone.